So this panel, I think, is really fascinating because it brings together Climeworks, which you all by now know quite a bit about, as well as two other firms that are doing really interesting things in natural climate, in natural carbon removal solutions. So Pachama, as well as Lithos Carbon. So I'd like to bring up the whole panel, Christoph, Diego, and Mary. Welcome, and if I mispronounce the company name, that's because, I don't know, I'm a moron. So it's just been a long day. So bringing tech and nature together, which is something that all of your companies are increasingly doing. My first question, well, let's start with you, Diego, and go down the line. What are some of the most innovative ways you're seeing your company and others that you're looking around at leverage new technology to bolster natural carbon solutions?
Yes, thank you for having us. I'm the founder and CEO of Pachama. Pachama is a company that was started about 6 years ago with a mission of helping address climate change by protecting and restoring nature. Specifically, we've been developing technologies that harness satellite data and AI to monitor, measure, and report on the carbon sequestration by natural ecosystems. And we use that data to help bring more transparency and quality to the nature-based carbon markets. Specifically, we've been helping projects that are doing reforestation and conservation get carbon credits, and then companies that are investing in these projects acquire, evaluate, and report on those projects. We also help originate new reforestation projects that will remove a lot of carbon during the next few decades, and of course, help restore the biodiversity of these ecosystems and empower local communities. So our technology is technology at the service of MRV, as is called in this sector, which is measurement, reporting, and verification. And I like to say that the entire planet is nature. So in a way, I see all these solutions as nature-based solutions. We focus on the living part of nature, which is how the biosphere constantly recycle carbon to rebalance the climate of our planet. But I am very excited to be sitting with other people that are taking on other verticals that are equally essential to restoring forests and other ecosystems.
And as somebody who covers weather and extreme weather in addition to climate, your use of satellite data is something that I could immediately recognize and get interested in, especially with the use of AI to process that satellite data. How about you, Mary, the same question about some of the most innovative ways that you're seeing both at your own company and elsewhere?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question, and thanks so much for having us here. So a little bit about how our company combines nature and tech. We see ourselves as a hybrid approach. We are inspired by nature. There's a process in the natural world that already removes 1.1 billion tons of carbon dioxide every year through the power of rocks. And about like a 10-second explanation is when rocks interact with acid rain, which just naturally comes down into the atmosphere, leads to a chemical reaction that traps the CO2 in that acid rain. It can store it permanently, and it goes into the oceans, can be stored for 100,000 years. What we do is we're using about 11 years of research at various institutions, and we are now accelerating something that the world already knows how to do. It's a very powerful process. Without this one process on Earth, we would look like Venus with greenhouse gases everywhere. But we're able to get it to happen 100 to 1,000 times faster by using biogeochemical techniques and also developing MRV, or measurement tools, so we can create trust and transparency so the buyers, which are increasingly catalytic and necessary for this market can get behind this, fund the solution that we have been working on, and accelerate the deployment of it worldwide. So I think something exciting is that the Earth knows how to do so many different things. It has been in equilibrium for a long time. So whether it's mineralization, which is the end step of Climeworks, whether it's reforestation, which is what Pachama is doing, or nature-inspired things like what Lithos is doing, there's so many ways of taking what the Earth knows how to do, accelerating that, and then finding really creative ways of getting that out in the world on the time scales needed for climate change.
And you found a positive way, a positive spin on acid rain too, which I think is great. Christoph, curious as to your answer to that question, and then I will have a new question that I'll start with you.
Let me add something incredibly trivial. You might have noticed Marcus, no offense, Marcus, he introduced the panel as tech versus nature. Maybe you're seeing the title, it's tech and nature. So the trivial thing I want to say, the most incredible innovation, Andrew, is communication. It's a very trivial thing I'm saying. Like I started research on air capture 17 years ago. We started the company 15 years ago, and there were so many meetings where we met customers or others and said, oh, we're sorry, we're close to you, we just do nature. Isn't that a bummer? It's a missed opportunity, right? Doesn't make any sense. Oliver made the point very strongly this morning, said, we have to look at that holistically, right? This has to work together. On a very big picture, today, we are like the weak part. Nature exists at scale, right? Today, a lot nature is done. Tech isn't done to that extent. But imagine a world, right? Let's fast forward to 2050 and assume tech became cheaper than nature. What will happen? Humans might gravitate to only doing tech and forget about nature. But there are a lot of non-CO2 benefits to doing nature, right? So the point I want to make is today and in the future, you have to look at that holistically, and this is why we're sitting here and want to bring this together.
And of the carbon removal market, writ large, how big of a role so far do you see nature tech ventures playing versus more pure tech plays like Climeworks might be considered in that bucket?
Well, 99% portfolio and 1% presumably pure plays. At the end of the day, it's a very strong customer need that we offer holistic approaches to that game. Again, this example I gave before, there are many examples when we were confronted with potential off-takers saying, hey, we only do nature. And before we looked into nature or hybrid approaches like enhanced weathering, we had to say, I'm sorry, we can't offer that. And that's a bummer, because that takes speed out of the system. It's an off-taker who wants to use that, right? But we can't offer it. So by being able to offer that, we can bring speed to the game. And I'm glad that many companies do that. And why they do it is because the risk-reward profile is very balanced, right? Especially, well, we're sitting interesting, not on purpose, but that way. So like nature tech, if you take those two extremes, if you want, nature is affordable or more affordable. We're sort of more expensive. Nature exists at scale. We're developing scale. On the other hand, nature has comparatively lower durability. We have higher durability, and enhanced weathering exactly sits in the middle of it. So if you think about like a balanced risk-reward profile, you actually want to have portfolios, and this is why most companies do that, and only the smallest share of them are actually using pure play on either of those sides.
Gotcha. And Mary, one thing that somebody here said to me when they saw this panel listed was that your company is very strong on MRV. And the methods are coming out of real open source procedures developed at Yale and elsewhere. I wondered if you could take me through just a little bit of that and what role that has played in the success of your firm, because MRV of enhanced weathering of many different natural climate removal sources, is a stumbling block for a lot of purchasers and a lot of reporters in trying to, cover some of these companies and tell what is really real and what isn't.
Absolutely, great question. So to start off with some framing, when we first started the company, which was, we've done about 11 years of research, but the company is only about 2 years old. When we first started the company, there's this big question mark in the field, which is, why not just spread the rocks? Just go do that and do that faster. And we were like, no. The way that we think about it, and I think the way that everyone on the stage today thinks about it, is the quality has to come first, because you need this market to last for a long time, and you need it to be very big. How I think about it is if we all collectively remove 100,000 tons from the atmosphere, that's like great, that's a celebration, that's not been done before, but that's like scooping a cup of water out of the ocean. That does not help any of us. We need to be at millions and billions of tons, and for that there needs to be openness, trust, transparency, the themes this whole conference has spoken about. So from that perspective, from day zero, we have always gone for the most rigorous approach, even though it costs us more money today, because we think that is absolutely critical. So a little bit about our MRV approach is we take really spatially dense samples before we do any deployments. After we spread these special volcanic rocks, we do this on every single farm where we deploy these volcanic rocks, because every farm biogeochemically is diverse and captures carbon at a slightly different speed. And we fundamentally believe that you make what you measure. So you really need to know what is actually happening. That is how you learn. You learn by deploying, you learn by doing. And then over time, we're hoping to create the largest data set possible on enhanced weathering in diverse geographies across the world as well. We have made a commitment to open sourcing that data and sharing that openly with nonprofits and academics. Even though that seems IP generating, I actually think a lot of IP can live in other things, how efficient you are in logistics, your supply chain, your statistics, developing models off of that. So someday we will not be sampling every 6 months on every hectare. That actually does cost a good deal of money. Yeah. But that is the model we took. We don't want to cut any corners. We want to have very conservative buffers up front and build that trust, because we know this can go the whole way. We know this can potentially capture gigatons, because the Earth already does that without any of our help, and we can get this to happen so quickly. So we chose to go really intense on the scientific rigor early on, and we're so excited to be sharing that tech and to be working with different researchers who really focus on that as well.
Awesome. We'll start with you on this one, Diego. What barriers are you facing as you try to build and scale natural carbon removal technology? We've heard a lot about some of the barriers facing other types of tech, and the macro scale with a great presentation by McKinsey. So I'm curious what you're experiencing at the project level at Pachama.
How many hours do we have?
Approximately 14 minutes.
Definitely lots of challenges to scale nature-based carbon removals. Even though we've been planting trees for as long as humanity existed, to do it at scale, to do it with quality, there is a lot of things that need to happen. First and foremost, demand. That is still a problem. I would say that on the demand side, one of the problems is that we come from a legacy carbon markets that was paying very low prices per ton of avoided emissions credits that in some cases had very generous assumptions, so to say, and therefore were overcredited, which allowed these projects to be sold for very low prices. That has set an expectation that for a few dollars per ton, you can actually get your carbon accounting done, and that's not the case. If you want high quality nature-based carbon removals, we're talking about $50 to $100 per ton, actually. If you want high biodiversity, with strong local social empowerment, we're talking about prices that are higher than was expected before, and the demand is still coming to terms with those prices. Also, the number of companies that are today purchasing or off-taking, investing in carbon removal projects is very small compared to the entire economy. So as McKinsey partner showed earlier, it is an early market, and we need to incentivize more companies to commit and to start today investing in projects. On the supply side, you need to enroll landowners. There's two ways that you can go. One way is to buy land, but if we really want to do this at scale, we need to work with local landowners around the world in the forest countries, right? We need to educate landowners. They're going to commit their land for an entire generation or two, and they need to believe that the income that they're going to get is going to be equivalent to other land uses, right? So there's education on the supply side. And then there are some operational challenges, like you need seedlings and saplings. In certain areas, producing the trees at scale is a bottleneck. You need labor that is trained on how to do tree planting right. And then you need, of course, more technology tools like the ones that we're building to accelerate the design, the carbon accounting, the certification of these projects. So challenges all around, but definitely us and other groups are working diligently to address them, and we feel very confident that they can be overcome, and that where there is a will, there is a way, and that eventually gigatons of carbon can be sequestered by enhancing natural ecosystems around the world.
Thank you. I do want to solicit audience questions. We would like to get to those in just a couple of minutes. So if you have them on this really interesting intersectional topic, please do send them, submit them via the app. So, you talked about this a little bit earlier about how this is not an either or, but an and. But to what extent are your companies at all competing with one another for tech or customers or workers? Is there any area where you see the labor market kind of there being a finite number of specialists in something, whether it's AI and crunching huge data sets that might be satellite sensed, or chemists, or et cetera. I'm curious whether any of that comes into play, or you just haven't seen it.
Well, maybe to start, the largest share of climb workers is specialists, and you've seen 50 of them in the morning, and I'd be surprised if they were helping your product, or maybe there are some aspects in an engineering part in enhanced weathering when crashing stones. So to make a long story short, I haven't thought about that, to be honest, and I don't think that this is a scaling issue. Clearly, offtake is we all want offtake. But again, the point we want to make, if we combine the three or more of them, we're actually looking into 5 approaches, we have higher chances, that's maybe the counterintuitive part, higher chances to fill the order book and they get the offtake. So there's rather a synergetic catalyzing effect of combining them than a competing effect.
That makes sense. Either of you want to make comments on that?
I very much agree. I think actually talking to many buyers on our end as well, we see that they want to have many shots on goal. They know that there's different things that will support different parts of the world. We actually all work in fairly different parts of the world, and there are different labor communities that they're tapping into, different circular economies, different industries that they're helping to spin up. So I actually think that portfolio approach is really powerful, and they get to see the speed of all these technologies coming down the cost curve in new ways. So I haven't seen that yet, so same kind of answer as Christoph.
Cool.
Yeah, I would say that we're competing with inaction. We're competing with companies doing nothing about their carbon emissions, and we need to make it more expensive to do nothing than to actually take responsibility for your carbon emissions. And I do agree that the future of carbon removal is portfolio approaches to all the verticals, and that these portfolios will actually increase demand. On the supply side, we actually compete with other land uses rather than with other forms of carbon sequestration. So I don't see competition.
What makes you optimistic about the use of technology in CDR, or pessimistic? And we're in a period right now where the conversation, at least in Washington, about energy is only about energy and AI. And the question asked to anybody who uses AI is, are you concerned about the pollution burden of that and of the data centers? Partly it's that DC is in the middle of data center alley in Northern Virginia. But I'm curious as to whether any of you who are using AI are at all concerned about the use of that technology in maybe upping your own carbon footprint.
I will start by saying that definitely AI in general will increase energy demand significantly. It's expected that in 10 years, probably 10% of global energy consumption is going to be by AI data centers. Now, the good news is that the companies that are driving that AI revolution are the ones that are investing the most on clean energy development and on carbon removal. Companies like Microsoft and Meta and Google. So I'm excited to see a new generation of companies that are going to drive the next energy demand that care about making sure that that demand doesn't increase climate change. I think that AI, well, I think we're all confused about AI and how much value to society or problems to society can bring. But definitely on climate and nature and carbon, there's so many use cases for AI that can increase transparency, measurements, and ultimately efficiency and speed to deployment of capital into the solutions that I'm very excited about the use of AI. We do train models. Our footprint is negligible compared to big tech companies, but I think that it's definitely worth investing more in AI.
Cool. I'll give you a 5-minute head start to news that'll break in a few minutes, since this is not live streamed, and please don't tweet or X this. In a speech this morning on climate change, Secretary General of the United Nations is going to come out and strongly endorse carbon dioxide removal and storage, saying, I also encourage scientists and engineers to focus urgently on carbon dioxide removal and storage to deal safely and sustainably with final emissions from the heavy industries hardest to clean, and I urge governments to support them. Also saying this is not a silver bullet, and this cannot be a substitute for drastic emissions cuts or an excuse to delay fossil fuel phase out. I would imagine the three of you would agree with this. This is obviously something the IPCC has previously said. I have not seen the UN Secretary General come out and endorse this to this extent, given the speeches that he's continuously given to try to get G7 and G20 to act. I'm just curious if any of you has a reaction to that.
I'll pipe in real quickly. I very much agree with that statement. That's incredibly exciting. So it's awesome to be in this room and hear that first. One of the things we think about, and one of the reasons we're really passionate about our particular pathway, is because it's in a hard-to-abate sector. Agriculture. Agriculture is responsible for 25% of the world's emissions. And to your AI question, despite GPT, we are not all robots yet. So we do need to eat, and we need to feed a growing population. So decarbonizing something that is necessary just makes sense. So I'm so excited to hear that. And I think that something that we should all think about, and hopefully maybe might be part of their statement as well, is the way that this can also transform communities. We are all creating up here new jobs. We are creating new economies as we speak. All the jobs are going to be opening up in America from the various Climeworks plants. We are helping to support the bottom lines of farmers and improving their profitability. In some cases, they get increased crop yields of 20 to 30% in some cases, and obviously creating so much more biodiversity and richness in these local communities. And I hope that maybe this statement will also branch out into more
Don't worry,
about.
it's a very long
I'm
speech.
sure it's a much longer statement.
It's a very long speech.
Very excited about that top line.
Selfishly, being a passionate engineer, my co-founder Jan 2 weeks ago sent me a text message with the first test results of our Gen 3, and I said, hey, I think that's that's the highlight of the year.
Yeah.
But it seems we have our second highlight to this. So besides the Gen 3 news, this seems to be the highlight of the year, what you just said.
Potentially. I did break the embargo, but hopefully nobody broke it even further. I didn't know if we have any questions from the audience.
Just one so far.
Thank you. Companies are increasingly required to evaluate and mitigate impacts on nature and biodiversity. Can there be synergies between a company's carbon removal strategy and nature impact mitigation strategy with nature-based removals?
Absolutely. There is, of course, the no deforestation law in the European Union, which will impact supply chains, and there are many companies that are starting to looking at insetting and making sure that they reduce emissions or remove carbon on their supply chains through restoration projects in the supply chain regions. But also on carbon removal, we and others are starting to measure some markers of biodiversity so that you can also report the biodiversity impact of your carbon projects and show the positive impact that you're having on biodiversity. Water is another big one, and there are companies that use a lot of water, and these projects are recovering watersheds and sources of water. So I think that, yeah, that's one of the cool things about nature-based solutions is that they're holistic and they tackle more than one environmental problem at once. But we need to definitely improve on the MRV of these other aspects of the projects.
Yeah. Mary, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'll say a few quick ones. So one of the cool things that we haven't covered is for enhanced weathering, our company uses 100% already processed, no need for crushing or mining or grinding feedstocks. And so we are actually reducing the land footprint of these waste products that otherwise would be going to landfills or take a massive amount of space. Like one of our big stockpiles of waste materials that we deploy is the size of 14 Empire State Buildings. That is quite big. I realize we're in Europe, but it's quite big. And so that also helps the circular economies that we're building, the crop yield improvements, and also the basalt we add to the soil helps reduce topsoil erosion and generally helps the productivity of the land and reduces the land use from agriculture. So I think there's just so many ways of thinking creatively, using technology and saying, hey, we don't want to just solve the climate problem with these technologies. How do we plug into the other needs that our societies have? So very much thinking about those lines.
Great, thanks. I'm getting a flashing light here. I want to thank everybody on this panel. I learned a lot. I hope folks out there learned something. And I'll be around. These folks will be around as well to answer any further questions a little later on. Thank you.